instructional materials grant. Because Mayor Fuller was able to give funds to literacy implementation at the end of last year, the Department of Education has considered that an adequate match to then match her investment with a $1 million continuation of the instructional materials grant. We look forward to how Dr. McCall, our Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, and her team will use those funds to further the gains that we have made in instructional deployment of our new literacy curriculum. So congratulations to everyone. This is a real win for the district. Second, I just wanted to say that there was an email regarding use of time in February break that I sent to all families, and we're going to talk all things calendar all night long, but I just wanted to highlight a couple pieces for people based on questions that came from members. So this was a February 3rd email that I sent to families. It went to everyone's inbox just explaining how the days out on strike would be covered in the future. So a couple of explanation points that need to be done based on the feedback I've received. So thank you for writing in. I do read all of the emails and try to make adjustments accordingly. So April break within the calendar this year is our snow day safety days, if you will. So then people are asking me what order of days will be used for snow days. So I had a lot of requests for this. So I'm just making the decision right here. Can't be a lot of debate about it because there's only really 4 days that can happen, and God help us, I hope we don't have 4 snow days. So April break, we would start with Thursday of that week as the first day, then Wednesday as the second, and Friday as the third. Trying to give folks long weekends and trying to extend the President's Day weekend scenario. I will be putting this in an email to all families, but this preserves as much long weekend travel as possible for folks if that's something that they had planned. And again, this is only if we have snow days in the future. So that was a question that came up again and again. On to a future type topic, the profile of a graduate sessions we held on January 17th at North and 18th at South, which do seem like a lifetime ago, were exciting nights where we dared to dream about the future of our NATIC students and what we would like them to be doing in our community. Thank you to all of the folks who came. There were about 60 people each night. It was a nice conversation. We have notes from that, and I will be publishing that out to the community. It's not too late to sign up for the Profile of a Graduate Design Team, which would allow you to have a say on the core competencies that the district will take forward in the Profile of a Graduate. This is open to students, to staff, and to community members and families. So if you're interested in that, please email my office and we'll get you signed up to participate. And then finally, I just wanted to say a few words as we kick off a discussion of our new teacher contract and other items about the return to school and work. And first, I just want to say, how does a school superintendent say anything adequate to the district and the community on this varied and polarized moment in our city after the strike? And I want to recognize the losses that our children and our families suffered and recognize how our educators, depending on their role relative to ongoing negotiations, also feel a range of emotions: disappointment, anger, regret, confusion, coercion, happiness, unity. But a common theme across every constituent that I meet is about trust and what might have been lost or what was worsened in this difficult time. I talked to 60 people today, and no one had the same feelings or the same orientation to our recent time. I share this in case this is where you find yourself, no matter who you are in the community, and perhaps like me, you see so many sides and so much misinformation and accusation, and all of it adds up to people sometimes retreating from the community or retreating into an immediate community so that you don't have to succumb to a belief that is not a fit, or you are worried about letting go of your convictions. I just want to say to our colleagues, do not retreat from the idea that this district values the same ideals as you. You are our colleagues, our professional colleagues, and we value you. Your leadership and governance team hold the same desires for students and our profession, and we will not abandon support for you and we join in a process of listening as we undertake a healing process and must model it for our community and especially for our kids. Because together we are this district and we are the community. Colleagues and community members, please don't retreat at this important time. This is the time to take a moment, calm reflection is needed, and to ready us for future partnerships. To villainize or erode anyone is wrong, to judge without firsthand knowledge is wrong, and to retreat from seeking to mend what's broken for us is also wrong. Time alone won't heal us, but together staying in community and learning to contend with high conflict struggle will heal us. And in my short time here, it seems like high conflict visits Newton on a regular basis because of the passion and intellect and care of the community and my colleagues. So we could use this moment as an opportunity to become skilled in contending with our highly involved, conflict-prone community in such a way to make us stronger, respecting viewpoints, but remaining indivisible as a community in support of our young people. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Nolan. Appreciate that. Is there any questions or comments from any of the members on the superintendent's report? Okay.
All right.
All right.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please. Go ahead, Amy.
Is there any consideration for looking at Good Friday for the Franklin folks to make up their day so that the year can end at the same time for everyone?
So I think you have to ask me that during the calendar portion of this
I
moment.
have no questions at this time.
And I actually have a note about it to address it.
And,
Yep.
we can cover that as we get into the calendar. Thank
Okey
you.
doke.
Okay.
You did great.
All right, so we'll move on to our consent agenda, which has 4 items for tonight. We have the meeting minutes from January 8th to approve. There is an international field trip memo, a car donation, and a grant award,
Which I already talked about. Yeah.
which Dr. Nolan just mentioned. So if there's any items that a member would like to pull from the consent agenda to have further discussion, please let me know. All right. With that, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Hunting?
Yeah, I'd like to, recommend to approve these consent agendas.
Okay, you're moving to approve the 4 consent agenda items.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
I second.
Okay, moved by Ping, second by Rajiv. Is there any further discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2? Yes. Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 8?
Yes.
And Ward 9.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That is 9-0. The consent agenda passes unanimously. And we will move on to our items for discussion tonight. The first of which is a discussion and vote to approve collective bargaining and return to work agreements for NTA units A, B, C, D, E, covering the period from September 1st, 2023 to August 31st, 2024, and from September 1st, 2024 to August 31st, 2027. So, just so everyone's aware who's watching the meeting, the school committee did vote on the contract in emergency session at a 10 a.m. Meeting on Saturday morning, the day after we came to our tentative agreement. We believe it's a best practice here to have a second vote in a non-emergency meeting, a regular open meeting that has been posted under the 48 hours of open meeting law. And that way, there would be no issues or no questions about the vote itself. I trust everyone has had ample opportunity at this point to go through the contract and through the return to work agreement. obviously, schools have been back in session, thankfully. There is a slide presentation in our materials and that is posted online. Lisa, that's posted both with our meeting materials and on the website, correct? Yes. Yes, so posted in our meeting materials and the website, which covers all the key provisions of the contract and return to work agreement, including COLAs, benefits, parental leave benefits, time and learning, all the key topics are summarized there in a fairly digestible format. So with that, and given the time to digest things, I'll open up to the members to see if we have any further questions at this time. Emily, please go ahead.
So I have been getting some questions and feedback from members of the community, and my question isn't really a question for me. It's a question that's been asked by the community, and some confusion, or at least not understanding, really two areas. One is what actually is in the time and learning document, the changes. I think that's something that is kind of high level in the presentation, but may be worth just a brief discussion of somebody describing what that actually means. And the second is, why do we require a return to work document? Those are the two questions that I've been getting.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Nolan, would you like to take the time and learning
Sure.
piece of that?
Yep. So in general, the time and learning agreement is the part of the contract that governs time, workday, intention of time, duties, those types of items. It's pretty extensive and varies by level in the Newton Public Schools contract. So there's a separate piece for elementary, middle, and high school. So some really positive developments for the time and learning agreement that have come out of our discussions was that there was an alignment, as you all know, because I spoke to you quite often and early about the need for additional prep time for elementary educators in particular. And that is an aligned goal that the NTA and administration share, and you know that you have put forward the first steps towards addressing some of that in this in this upcoming budget. So I thank you for your support on that. What we do need to do, however, relative to the elementary schools is there's such significant change based on our EL curriculum implementation, and now the fact that we want to take a look at the whole school day in order to find a way to increase prep time. It affects all the other classes that are run in an elementary day. So an outcome of this agreement, not included in the time and learning agreement, but included in a side letter, is that we will have a conversation and a committee which includes union representations, teachers, staff, principals, administrators, in order to actually determine what should that day look like and what should the timing on all of that be. So I'm really excited about that. I think that that's a good move for teachers and their support, which means it's a great move for kids because teachers will have more prep time, and we aspire to align the schedule in such a way to provide more support time for kids. And that's something that I've also talked to you about under the umbrella of what's called MTSS, so students' supports within the school day. Also aligned with that was the idea that we need to add to our social worker group, and in order to provide interventions on mental health in the same way we would for academic needs. So in this proposed budget this year, you've heard my proposal to add social workers. That was amplified and part of the core mission of the union in this negotiation. So again, a nice place of alignment. But in the negotiations, it is not contract material to put staffing levels within a time and learning agreement. It is great that we put it in a side letter to actually take an even larger look at mental health services in the Newton schools as a whole. So yes, adding social workers is one piece, but what if we could take a more comprehensive look at how to service our students and provide mental health services? And so I'm really excited about that side letter that allows us to take that dive in there. The other pieces in time and learning were defining schedules on elementary short release days, talking about what professional work time and prep time is, and that it's valued by both parties. Some discussions about duties and whether to have them or not. That actually did not change in this particular time and learning agreement. Removing the current cap on only English classes at the high school. So as you know, we're interested in adding additional staffing at the high school, particularly in math and science classes, and have committed to that through the upcoming budget season in order to reduce those class sizes in math and science classes. Currently, in the old time and learning agreement, there was a cap only for English. And so again, we have created a side group that will study class sizes and scheduling at the high school in order to make long-range planning recommendations to you and to address those class size issues at the high school in a more holistic way. So just putting in math and science addresses the immediate urgency for me of class sizes that are too large, but it may have ripple effects, and we want to solve all of those issues and restore the types of electives that make students really jazzed about school and fill their schedules and any empty time blocks. So let's see, other major pieces were the start of the school day and end of the school day and clarity around those pieces, and I think those are the big ones that we covered. I'm not seeing any head shaking out there, so those are the big ones.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, return to work.
So, we're gonna discuss the
Sure,
return.
sure.
So, it's typical in these situations where the parties will sign a document. This is a 3-page document or so, governing return, the conditions of return to work, and it'll include things such as, governing the schedule going forward, how we're going to deal with these makeup days. Parties will typically drop their claims against the other claims against each other that have arisen during the course of negotiations. There will, typically be a provision that says, we will not retaliate, they will not retaliate, otherwise seek any claim against, a teacher, a school committee member, et cetera, administrator, et cetera. And then NPS did incur over $1 million of expenses through the course of the strike, and we have sought for some reimbursement from the NTA. We have agreed that they will reimburse us somewhere between $275,000 and $625,000 of that, in excess of $1 million, dependent on what happens with the fines levied at the state level, and that will govern where that reimbursement falls. So it's it's sort of a regular part, I guess, of this process, to the extent anything can be a regular part of this process. It was sort of the last thing agreed to, handwritten comments being made in it before we sign the final document on Friday night.
Mr. Chair, may I
Yes,
add to that?
please.
So I just want to say that I have no experience with return to work plans, didn't even know that that would be a thing in terms of ending the strike. However, it was desired by Mass Teachers Association leadership, the Newton Teachers Association leadership, and the school committee, because it helps to put to bed some of the existing pieces that Mr. Bresky just spoke about. But it was also a way for staff to make up the lost learning days that young people experienced and the days of pay that would be associated with that. So this is not, as I've heard it discussed in the last couple of days, a punishment or a message about how we trust or don't trust our staff. It's an attempt to make restitution on all the parts and to make everyone whole. So I just want to make sure that people understand that without this, and without addressing the days missed, there would be loss of pay for our staff.
Chris?
Yep. Tamika, go ahead, please.
So if I could add just a couple more things onto both your summation and Anna's summation as well. I think for any community member looking at the return to work agreement and wondering why is it necessary and what does it do, the simplest way to capture that is it is necessary to end a period of a dispute. And I think this is a dispute with a capital D, the biggest dispute that any school district possibly could ever have, a strike with its, one of its bargaining units. This agreement should be thought of as a contract that governs both of the parties, meaning the school committee and the union, going forward. How we interact with each other, how we treat each other, what we agree to do and not to do as we're contemplating returning to work and going back to the normal course of business in a public school. And so that's why you see the agreement covers outstanding disputes and dismissing them. Those disputes were related essentially to the collective bargaining and related to work to rule. And so it's an agreement on the union's behalf of saying we will settle these claims here, and with a promise for the school committee to not retaliate, not affect discipline on any staff who participated in the strike. And as you said, it also governs how we're going to address makeup days and lost pay. It's not punitive, as Dr. Nolan said. It is simply an agreement for how we're going to go forward in and try to meet each other's needs in a respectful and collaborative and productive manner.
Yep, thank you for both for making that point of there's nothing in that contract that is punitive. This is how we're going to operate the schools going forward and how we all move forward. Any other questions? Oh, Paul, sorry, didn't see you up there. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chris. I want to move away from some of these technical aspects to just make two comments, if I might. The first is to express, I know what is our shared great appreciation to Kathy Shields, who as a retired member of the school committee volunteered to be part of this negotiating committee over the last several weeks. A tremendous public service on her part and a key contributor to all that happened. Her professionalism, her wisdom, and the like just came through day after day after day in those rooms. And I just wanted to acknowledge that wonderful contribution by one of our retired school committee members. The second piece of gratitude I'd like to offer, in the last meeting, Tamika talked about all the staff and the committee members and the work they did, which was absolutely the case. I also want to recognize the thoughtful, measured, and prudent comments by our member of Congress and by our elected officials in the state legislature and in the city council during this period over the last several weeks. They, being elected officials, I believe understood our role as elected officials and gave us the deference and the benefit of a doubt that we were trying our best to serve the public, to serve the children, the families, and the teachers and other members of our staff. And so I just wanted to express my thanks to those elected officials for their thoughtful end period. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate those comments, and I would extend those same thanks to those elected officials. Any other questions? Amy, please go ahead.
I have a money question that I've received from several constituents since the contract was passed on Saturday. We made it really clear that the agreement would not result in layoffs and that we weren't propping up the budget based on reductions in spending elsewhere. I've seen numbers since in the community, particularly the number 53 million. And so I just wondered if you could speak on a high level about how we are paying for the contract that we've settled.
Yep. So I think I can probably answer at least most of that, and please, anyone else, feel free to join in. So I had seen some of the same $53 million number floating around in the press, and I did some digging as to where that number might have come from. and I believe where it came from is our business and finance office, who had, I'm not sure if everyone saw it during the course of the negotiations, the sort of running tally of what the asks were and what the NPS proposals were and what they amounted to on each side. And that's how we came to when we would say there was a $60 million gap. That's what that represented. The $53 million represents the aggregate increase in cost of the contract year after year after year from a baseline of 0. So it's not an amount of, concessions or something, as I think I've kind of seen it alluded to. It's, I believe of the 53 million, about 48 million represents COLA increases. So in the agreement we came to with City Hall in December of last year, where we had a 2.5%, 2.5%, and 3% COLA for the first 3 years of the contract, which is ultimately was agreed to, that is a huge part of that $48 million. It's, it actually represents, if you were to extend that out another year, it would represent almost the entirety of that $48 million of increase. So, in no world was the school committee ever thinking this contract will settle for a 0% COLA and the contract would be flat over the next 4 years. That would be nonsensical. But in the way that the business and finance office sort of aggregated those numbers, they aggregated them from that baseline of 0. So, really, if you want to think about it in the context of, what changed over the first 3 years, there was the $500 fixed COLA amount added to Unit C members only. And then there was the 4th year of the contract that was added, for which really there was no baseline before because we had not yet offered a 4th year of the contract. So I don't know if is that clear? Does that make sense? Yes, please go ahead, Mayor Fuller.
If I can build on that, and I appreciate any, you'll build on probably what I said. I think Chair Bresky looked at it, so what are we investing the dollars from into in the contract? Another way of answering your question, Amy, I think is, so where'd the dollars come from to begin with? And perhaps it might be helpful if I talk about that, because the most important decision I make annually is about the allocation to the Newton Public Schools. I had worked with the school committee as a whole, the school committee negotiating team, and intensively with Chris and the superintendent for months now. It has been clear for a very long time that the allocation to the Newton Public Schools for next year, for FY25, which begins in July, the increase will be a 3.6% increase. So that's step one. Step two, for months and months and months, we've been working on using 70% of an obscure kind of one-time funding called overlay surplus. And again, it worked closely with the superintendent and Chair Bresky over, so how many years do we want to use that over? What makes sense so that there wouldn't be a fiscal cliff when those ended? The superintendent was settling in, getting her hands around the budget and what she needed to add to the budget, as well as where she thought there might be opportunities for additional revenues through grants or other things, as well as some efficiencies where perhaps there are things that we're doing that we could do just a little bit better. So that was in mid-December. We worked out a way forward that was very comfortable for the needs of NPS to use 70% of the overlay surplus. over 5 years. The only other thing that I feathered in during the last month, some of it was in the intense 2 weeks, some of it was actually before. It was early in January before the decision of the NTA was announced. We've used $3 million of one-time free cash. In addition, that allows the superintendent to not have layoffs, and it allows me as mayor not to have layoffs, that it is all sustainable, and we believe a competitive contract that honors needs that the teachers and the union brought up, that the superintendent saw, and was sustainable. So I'm very proud that we have I think, a contract that works well for all the different players here. And we are not like the Andover School Committee, who is mournfully signing a contract and then laying off people.
Yeah, so I think, to kind of sum that all up, it was that $53 million was by and large baked into our offer in December 18th. And then, the fourth year of the contract was added, that, again, didn't really have a baseline number to work from. But those funds were allocated by virtue of just our regular rate of growth of the budget that we expect at that 3.5% level, plus the overlay funds that the mayor had referenced. Any other questions? Okay. Before we, yep, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, is this the only time we're talking about the contract, we move on, or we have other time to talk?
So I think the plan is we're going to vote tonight, again, to do it in a, very official capacity, in a properly noticed meeting, not in an emergency meeting. And then, as an agenda item, we'll move on from there.
Okay, basically, probably I said something people already said, but I like to personally say that, first of all, we are all relieved that this is over. And also, Mayor just mentioned this is a sustainable and competitive contract. That those two words are very critical, and people like to hear that. $53 million, of course. This is based on the past contract, as you explained. I'm glad to mention that because, people were concerned, how did you manage to find the money now to sign the contract? But overall, I like to say people working together, the whole community. And I guess probably 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago, we were wondering how this will end. I'm seriously, everybody losing sleep, how this will end. But I'm glad that the community come together. People come together, teachers, unions, and the school committee, and the mayor's office, and city councilors, and all the community people, stakeholders working together. I'm so proud, and Newton found some way to solve this huge crisis. And at one time, people probably were almost hopeless. Boy, this will be bad. So I really appreciate that. And I'd like to say thank you to Tamika and to Chris and to Paul and to Kathy, and for this wonderful, our school committee's negotiation team working almost whole year, right? Starting from last December, October. Thank you. And Tamika certainly played a big role last year. And as Kathy, as vice chair of school committee, and this is a tremendous work. And probably no one could understand fully how much time you guys spend and commitment you spend, and especially for past few weeks. And And I could not imagine if I were in that situation, how could I survive? But again, feel so proud, and this is over. And I'm also ready to, as people mentioned, that use the word heal. And this morning we visited the birth school. We met the parents, and most of the parents, if not all parents, were very happy. And they're reasonable, no one yelling at us, probably except one parent who probably a little bit still saying something which, like I heard 2 weeks ago. But otherwise, I think we're ready to move on. But healing is so important. And I want to emphasize again, and seems we have consensus here. We are ready to move on. But there's a lot of tremendous work, and it's not easy. Probably on service, I joke with people. I did not receive any emails after we signed a contract saying, what are you guys doing? Why should I sign this contract? No, not even one email if I can recall. This is a huge change. But again, I believe some people still had a bruised feeling underneath. And I want to make sure the committee hear that. I'm willing to work very hard. We are all working together. And there are no winners or losers, let's say. And we want to make sure we are move on. I think, Anna, you said something very nice this morning when you summarize, when we're meeting the PTO and other members of the birth school. And we need to, make sure that Newton is still a wonderful place, and we are proud of our education. As hundreds of parents reminded us, we moved to Newton because Newton has a wonderful school system. This is probably the most consistent sentence or statement in most of the emails. So I like to remind myself and my colleagues, yes, we're still proud of Newton school system. And let's work together, real hard, redouble our efforts to move on. Thanks.
Thank you, An Ping. I appreciate that. Let me just share my very quick thoughts here. I do want to thank everyone who was in that room with me for the 14 days. School committee members, our central staff. It was not a lot of fun, and I'm happy to have not seen you all for the last 5 days. But I said it Saturday, and I know there wasn't a lot of folks on that meeting, and I want to repeat it here, that I truly do have a different level of respect for each and every one of you, for the way you work through that situation under some very tough circumstances. So I do thank you all, and especially, as Paul said, to Kathy Shields, who had no obligation to do this and put 2 weeks of her life aside to see this thing through, and I respect that a ton. So with that, if there's no further comments, would someone like to put forth a motion to approve the contract? And if you could please use the wording from the agenda, because I know our lawyer would very much appreciate that.
So happy to make that motion. I don't see where that is on the agenda. That would have saved me. No, I pulled it up from our previous email. And unless it's changed, I've got it. But I just want to echo what you've said, what An Ping has said, and accept graciously your shout out for the school committee members of the team. Thank you, An Ping. But there were so many others, and Chris, you touched on them, but let's call them by name, and I'm going to try to do my best to give a shout out around the room. Folks who've been involved since October, and this is a long, long road. In the business finance office, Sean Mannion, Liam Hurley, in the HR, Joanny Santa, Caitlin Lewis. In our assistant superintendent team, we've got Aisha Farag, assistant superintendent of elementary education, and Toby Romer, assistant superintendent of secondary education. We have, I'm missing folks, Casey No Miller, our assistant superintendent of student services, and Dr. Nolan,
Jill.
Jill Murray Grady, who's sitting over there, who, wow.
Our general counsel.
Our general counsel for the Newton Public Schools. I don't think I've missed anyone, but if I have, shame on me.
Yep.
But these folks have carved aside hours, days, months of their lives on this process, and here, kudos to you, and job well done to us all. And you, Chris Brezski, as well. And with that, I will motion that the Newton School Committee approve the NTA proposed memorandum of understanding from 7 p.m. at February 2nd, covering the period from September 1st, 2023 through August 31st, 2024, and the period from September 1st, 2024 to August 31st, 2027 for the NTA Units A, B, C, D, and E, and approve the side letters of agreement concerning the mental health supports and high school class size attached to the memorandum of understanding, and authorize the chair of the committee to sign these agreements on behalf of the committee.
All right, thank you. That is moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Paul. Any further discussion on the motion?
I will.
All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2, yes. Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 8,
Yes.
and Ward 9.
Yes.
Okay. The
Can I add one
collective
more
bargaining
thank you?
agreement is approved. I'm sorry, what's that?
Can we thank a couple more people? Can we thank Lisa and Carolyn Campo and Julie McDonough and the amazing facilities staff at the Ed Center who were here interacting with you all in like crazy late hours? I don't think any of this would have gotten done without them.
Thank you.
Excellent point. Our
I
custodians.
totally agree.
Yeah, our custodians who were here throughout the 2-week period. Yeah.
Can I also add one more? Sorry.
Sorry.
I want to talk about Chris Bresky for a second. It takes a leader. He picked up the baton from Tamika Olszewski, who for months before had led us ably and thoughtfully and capably. And then Chris had the really difficult period where it was so intense and so difficult, and everybody's emotions, from our teachers and staff to our parents and students, were at a pitched fever. And with grace and leadership, with an eye to settling this and getting the kids back in school, but causing the least amount of harm in the process, for an eye for the day when kids would be back, and setting us up for the rest of this school year and the ones going forward. You are a remarkable leader, and you were the leader for all of us. I can't, you have, I think, the community's respect and admiration and gratitude.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We should probably end the award show. And,
We've one more motion.
get back to business.
So there's one more motion, Chris.
I do appreciate that, and I should say, though Mayor Fuller and I have had some public disagreements in this room over the budget, we had the resources we need to settle a competitive contract. And, we appreciate your partnership in getting there. All right.
All right.
Tamika, would you
Sure.
return to work?
Yeah, I will.
See what you
Very,
did there.
very good segue. Prior to that very good segue, one more award show recipient to the community and our principals who fed us and cheered us and carried us through that 2-week period of trial. All right, so move that the Newton School Committee approve the return to work agreement with the NTA and authorize the chair of the committee to sign the return of work agreement on behalf of the committee.
Okay, that is moved by Tamika. Is there a second? By
Second.
Paul. And is there further discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, we will take a roll call vote. Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2, yes. Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 8,
Yes.
and Ward 9.
Yes.
All right, that is 9-0 as well, unanimous approval of both agreements. Thank you again, everyone. I'm happy to have that agenda item behind us, and hopefully we'll never see that one pop up again. All right, let's move on to the second discussion item, which is the for year 25 revised calendar and homework policies. Dr. Nolan, do you want to, I assume, lead us off there?
So this is a power-packed agenda item. It's got 3 things for the committee to make decisions about. And I just want to let people know that we are behind where we usually are to approve the calendar in a given year so people can plan their lives. So I just want to say that. Second, here's what we're doing tonight. 1, voting about whether you will accept my recommendation about adding Lunar New Year to the calendar of holidays that are celebrated in our district. Second, the companion homework and holiday policies that I believe have to accompany observance of all of the religious observances that live in our calendar if we are going to have such observances. So that's your second read of that. You can, if you'd like, vote the calendar tonight and split the policy off. If you want to do that, we can look at it separately. So don't feel pressure there if you still have questions. And then third, you're actually voting the calendar itself with all of the iterations that you want in it. I just want to explain that back on January 8th, I gave you 2 drafts that are no longer truly relevant because one of the items that I was proposing was in our contract negotiations, we would trade 2 student-facing days that are not required by the Department of Education, but are included in your new teacher contract. So as many of you have raised to me, we pay teachers for actually 2 more additional student-facing days than they actually work in the school year. And there was some interest among the committee to bring that back, especially in light of learning losses and things like that. I was trying to get a full day of professional development for the system so that we could do a 6-hour set of trainings for our folks. And I proposed in the union negotiations that those 2 student days, which are not required by DESE, be traded in for the full PD day. That was not of interest to the NTA as proposed. Perhaps in the future it will be. So I have to eliminate the 2 items that I gave you before. So they're here just for memory lane purposes. So the work you do tonight, though, decides between option 3 and 4. And I tried to list for you at the bottom of this memo the decisions that you need to make. So relative to the calendar, you may or may not decide to have school on Election Day. You may or may not decide to choose Lunar New Year to add as a holiday in our calendar. You may decide to start school before or after Labor Day. This was an agreement that was reached in the new contract with the NTA. And you may decide to enact a 180-day school year for students or a 182-day school year for students. I will now add, based on Ms. Davenport's question about Good Friday and Franklin, you may want to explore if you would like to make that a day of school for Franklin only, although I would say to you that's very difficult to impact Catholics who might be celebrating the holy days that start with Good Friday and end with Easter that weekend. So I tried to avoid that in my recommendations. And so my recommendation to you, take it or leave it, is to implement calendar number 3, which allows for a 2 student days proposed to take place as added. I think we can all agree that students may need additional days to make up for time lost in the last many years. It votes Election Day, November 5th, as a day not in session for anyone, adults or kids. It adds Lunar New Year to the calendar, and it starts school after Labor Day. And I just want to assure the public, because we receive frantic emails from folks that the reason that we negotiated an earlier start possibility earlier than Labor Day is sometimes Labor Day starts like September 7th or 8th. And there are times where we may want to start before that time period. That is not my recommendation right now, particularly in light of the fact that we are going to school all the way to the end of June. So I know when these different schedules went out, people panicked. But my job is to make sure the school committee has the full knowledge on all the iterations that they can vote. And it doesn't mean that something is going to come to pass necessarily. So those are all the decisions that lay before you. And I think you will need a separate motion for the holiday to be added, and then one to approve a calendar.
Thank you. I was just going to suggest that. I was going to say, in terms of order of operations here, I believe what makes sense is this issue of adding Lunar New Year as an incremental holiday has been long outstanding. It's been something that's been studied at depth and discussed at depth by the committee. In my opinion, I would say the corresponding homework and holiday policies IKB and JHA, kind of go hand in hand with that. And I would think the logical order of operations for us would be to say, let's discuss those to the extent we feel further discussion is necessary and vote, and then we will know, what the deck looks like that we're playing with to move on to talk about the for year 25 calendar and to vote that. So if anybody has any objections to that, please let me know, because I feel like that would be the logical way to proceed. Okay, so, go ahead, Mayor
Can
Fuller.
I just ask a clarifying? I'm just wondering, on the memo dated February 6th, looking at draft number 3, the headline says school on election day, but the third bullet says school will
It
not
should
be in
not.
session.
Thank you,
I
it's an
just want-
error.
just
Yeah,
cl-
it should say no PD/school on election day.
And, okay, thank you, got it.
The no refers
Thank
to the
you.
PD.
Right.
To
and school.
both.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yep.
buildings, districts explode on election day.
Right.
Okay, so if everyone's in agreement with moving in that order, discussion on the concept of adding Lunar New Year as a school holiday, district-wide holiday, and the corresponding changes to the homework and holiday policies.
Do you want a motion?
Go ahead, Rajiv.
Thank you. Chris, I agree with the order of operations and just had a couple of comments related to the work done by the calendar working group and the recommendation from Dr. Nolan. So I think it was one of the most thorough assessments and surveys done for this kind of matter, or for that matter, anything that we have covered where we needed a lot of significant community input. So thank you to the people who did that, the members of this committee, and then the input from parents and students, families. I am in favor of having Lunar New Year be an official Newton Public Schools holiday. And I also appreciate the guidance provided by Dr. Nolan in terms of thinking of, in particular, Diwali and Eid, and keeping those in consideration, maintaining them as recognized observances for our students, and as the demographics of our city continue changing, certainly revisiting, the opportunity to, or the necessity of adding those as observances or official holidays in the future. So can very much appreciate the work and thoughtfulness that went into this recommendation and the data underlying it. And I will hand off to my colleague on Ping, who I think was next.
On Ping, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Rajiv, I appreciate your comment. And just quickly, a little bit history about this kind of work, committee work started. When Cassie Smith was here, I believe that was the summer or fall of 2022, when a group of students started the change.org and collect the signature support to, to raise the issue about Lunar New Year, and also with some kind of comment on the school homework policy regarding that holiday. And then I was contacted, and I thought that was very legitimate concern, and they got over 1,000 signatures. Incredible, starting from Newton South and Newton North, John Ying, and then Cassie Smith, as our interim superintendent, was very supportive. And then she talked to other superintendents of districts where they passed those calendars, including the Lunar New Year. So she proposed to have the survey, which was a little bit, time-consuming. But now looking back, and I really am grateful she did this. And if I recall correctly, the data showed that almost half of the students, families, and staff, participate in this survey. So significant participation. And for middle school and high school students and family, with the kids and then staff. So the data was very convincing. And Chris was also the member of this group, and he did a lot of data analysis, and I was very impressed. And provide the written comment, and so finally, Dr. Nolan took over this and then prepared a further memo and feedback and summary. This is tremendously teamwork. And I'd like to also thank Katie Hogue, and she is the data person and summarized and prepared a very professional report. And this took extra time out of her tremendously heavy workload to do this, and I mentioned a few times. So I think this will be model. And already Lexington School District contact us, say, hey, how do you do that? And I share with them what we did. And they said, another question, I haven't responded yet. But again, I think this will be model. And I appreciate that Rajiv said, and we will keep working on this. And when the enough feedback come in, and we can do further work. And finally, I want to say, Newton is really a leader in this, in terms of cultural recognition and inclusive work, and a very methodical community participation and data analysis. So this will be a wonderful, solid ground for us to move ahead with the cultural celebration, and for the truly diversity, equity, and inclusion spirit, which we highly valued in Newton.
Thank you, Ping. Any other comments, Paul?
Thank you, Chris. I want to start by saying that I'm totally in accord with Rajiv's point of view on this matter, and like him, want to express my appreciation for the mentioning of the role of Diwali and Eid in the community for those families who celebrate those holidays. The second point I want to make is, characteristically, An Ping is understating his role in the activities of the past couple of years with regard to this this matter. He mentioned the students who were involved and so on. What he neglected to mention was his advice and mentorship to those students as they went through their process, which helped them do an even better job, and actually helped provide those students with an important learning experience as well. So thanks to An Ping for all he's done. I hope, Chris, that you will give An Ping the honor of making the motion to institute this holiday as an observed holiday, because he's been the guiding force behind this.
Thank you, Paul. Any other, Emily?
Just really quick, because we haven't really mentioned the policy side. I also agree with everything that Rajiv said, and you said it succinctly and perfectly. I have nothing else to add to that. But I also can't overstate the importance of the policy and making sure that we codify actually what are the expectations, particularly for students who are celebrating holidays that we may not necessarily have off. So I appreciate that.
Yep, and, you know, to that point, Emily, and I did sit on the committee, it was certainly one of the findings of the committee that, you know, there was a break between policy and implementation, and so I think we're gonna have to put that on you, Dr. Nolan, to make sure that, you know, this policy is known and seen and represented in our buildings, and our teachers are aware of it, and our students are aware of it, so that, you know, it is respected. You know, I think from my perspective, in terms of having done a lot of work on this, you know, the framework I used in the memo I shared with the committee last year was this concept of, in thinking about Lunar New Year and in thinking about Eid and Diwali, and, you know, we have a roughly equal percentage of our population that celebrates Lunar New Year, and with the same intensity, so to speak, as does the percentage of our population that celebrates the Jewish holidays. And from that perspective, it just seemed like an easy decision. And the harder decision was, what do we do with Eid and Diwali? And, you know, I kind of thought about it in this sense of, you know, where is that line from accommodation, which is what these homework policies and holiday policies are intended for, to make sure that no one's punished for or disadvantaged, you know, for celebrating these holidays that are so important to them. But, you know, closing the district is a very blunt instrument. And I still don't know what the right answer is. I guess it's somewhere between, you know, 4% of the district and 20% of the district, but I don't know where that line is. And so I think it's important that as well that we return to the committee's recommendation that this gets revisited, you know, every 5 years or so, because, you know, the world is changing, and we certainly might want to move from that accommodation stance to that blunter instrument of closing the district in the future. And I think we have to keep our eye on that and not let that slide by. So, Amy, go ahead.
Can I just echo what Emily said about the importance, I think, of not bypassing conversations about the policy? My experience in the classroom is that you can't say that you value belonging and then force a child to be responsible for telling you that tomorrow is a very important day in their family and their homework's going to be late. And so as long as we're acknowledging major holidays and ensuring that we take the onus as educators to make sure that kids don't have to be put in that position, I'm fully supportive of everything in this document.
Thank you. All right, if there's no further discussion, would someone like to put forth a motion to approve Lunar New Year as a holiday and approve the 2 policy changes?
Well, certainly I will be very, very happy to move that to add the Lunar New Year as the official school holiday on the calendar of 2024 to 2025. I understand we will vote separately regarding other issues, right? So that's the only motion I make now.
I think we can include the policy vote with this.
Okay, yeah. With the policy regarding the holiday celebration or regarding the other?
The IKB and JHA, which are the homework and holiday policies.
Okay. And I would trust that and Jill or someone will help her to finalize the language. You know, what's the code word for the law? HK something? I apologize.
You can simply say that you move to approve the homework and holiday policies included in this memo.
Okay. So I move to add the Lunar New Year on the school official calendar for 2024 and 2025, and also include the homework policies related to this, all these cultural holidays. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Emily? Moved by Anping, seconded by Emily. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2 is yes. Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes, and congrats.
Thank you. Ward 5?
Yes?
Ward 6?
Yes,
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 8?
Yes.
And Ward 9?
Yes.
Okay, that passes 9-0. Thank you very much for everyone for your consideration there. And now we can move on, knowing that Lunar New Year will be on the calendar, we can move on to discussing the proposals that Dr. Nolan put forth, or any amendments or other proposals that committee members might want to make about next year's calendar. Paul and then Rajiv. Thank you.
thank you, Chris. I'd like to move approval of what's listed as draft number 3 in the memo from Anna dated February 6th, which is to eliminate, well, I don't have to list all that's in there, but as contained in the records of the meeting.
Okay, that is moved by Paul. Is there a second?
So we're going to decide on all the rest now all at once and not go item by item?
Well, there's a motion on the floor to approve
Okay.
the memo, but, I mean, obviously, that will be open for discussion, and that motion can be amended. So,
Just a reminder, this is next year's calendar, not this year.
Right.
is there a second to Paul's motion?
Yes, second.
Okay? So moved by Paul, seconded by An Ping. Discussion on the motion. Rajiv, please.
Thank you, Chris. So the first, and I think the primary question I have is actually around Election Day. And looking at that, I do understand that we have for many years dealt with members, with our citizens going into the elementary schools, generally along with a bake sale and voting. I think it has worked well. I've personally voted at several of the elementary schools as we've moved around Newton. So my question is the extent to which we think this could be a challenge. I know security issues had come up. I know there have been the Newton Police Department has done a wonderful job keeping the voting process safe and calm. So given that it's a day when we would be asking families to again figure out childcare and other things, I just was not sure how strong an impetus we have in terms of security to have that day be a day off.
Okay. Would you like to respond?
So I have deep concerns about being open that day. Most of Metro West is closed to students and has a professional development day for adults for this reason on that day. The last 2 presidential elections in Metro West around which I was administration were some of the most challenging days I remember in recent years. From where people park to how they address the building, the agitation level they have when they come to vote on a presidential election. I am uneasy opening the schools on that day, not because the police aren't doing a good job, the amount of people that it typically draws. And again, this is not to foreclose future election days being open. This is the presidential election day. This is a decision for this year that I would recommend. I am concerned about the volume of people that will be coming in and out of the schools on that day and the interaction of where these people end up. In those elementary schools, many of them do not have a clear point of entry that is guarded or directed by someone who is security. So they walk through most of the school and get to their location. And so it requires me to ask for a second detail because the law requires the first detail to stay in the voting area. So it's hard to address that.
So at least in the elementary schools where I've voted, it's been very clear that where entry and exit is, and you do not end up walking the hallways of the school.
Mhm.
But certainly, I haven't walked through every school in Newton like I know you have. Would there be a professional development day for educators on that day, or would it simply be a closed?
There would not, because we could not get that negotiated.
Okay.
To the schools, Pierce School certainly did have folks walking down through the hallways, because there's no external point to get into the gym where the voting was held. Thankfully, the Newton Police Department and the city clerk's office and the mayor did remedy that, and Pierce is no longer going to be used as a voting site, but that's just a personal example I know of, and I'm not sure if there's others that are like that, that are currently being used.
There are.
Mayor Fuller?
I think we do have to take the superintendent's concerns very seriously. I would just add for context a few things, which is, unlike 4 years ago, and I think probably forever, going forward, the use of mail-in ballots has expanded dramatically so that the number of people voting in person on election day has decreased substantially, along with we now have, it's standard operating practice to have early in-person voting for many days, again, before election day. The clerk's office and NPD have worked very closely with NPS. There are only a number of schools now where there isn't a clear entrance and exit into almost always the gym. And for example, just as Chris mentioned, we moved voting out of Pierce because it was a problematic situation. So if it's the will of the school committee to have that be a day in school, we can certainly keep working with the clerk's office for any school building. And I think there's just a couple more where people walk through a corridor in order to get to typically the gym. And we're looking more and more and more at combining, because voting is so low in person on election day, we're looking at combining more and more of the voting locations so that there will probably be fewer in the future, just because it doesn't make sense, given the number of poll workers and police officers you need, the more widely distributed they are.
Thank you for that insight. Paul, go ahead.
Thanks, Chris. I'm actually very sympathetic to the concerns raised by Anna, particularly with regard to this presidential election. And while Mayor Fuller, I agree with you about the overall trends, for this year, I think it would be wise to follow Anna's suggestion.
Thank you. Tamika?
Thanks, Chris. So I guess my concern is more of a logistical one. And it's not really a concern, it's just something I think we should understand how that kind of interplays with this decision if we close schools on election day. Some contingent of our staff would have to remain working on that day. I'm thinking particularly of our custodial employees. And so I don't know currently in their contract whether they work additional hours outside of school closure. We'll have to sit and think about that, but I do want this committee to kind of keep that in mind as we make this decision, that we would have to figure out how to pay our employees on this particular day who would have to still report to work.
I don't, is Mayor Fuller, is that something that's, I'm not sure how that, what happens there.
Sorry, they're your custodians, not city custodians, so I think we'll have to work with their union and with them, and
This is why we do this
figure
before
that out.
budget season.
Well, I was thinking about from the perspective of, I mean, the buildings are open for non-school uses. They're open as city buildings on that day, so I'm not sure. I mean, I can't think of another good example or another good analogy of when school buildings are open for sort of pure city uses that isn't something that
But
like,
Sports on the weekends.
yeah, but those, I mean, those are sort of contracted things, and we get building revenues for, use of school buildings.
Having not looked at the custodial unit contract, the day wouldn't be a day off if it wasn't listed as a day off in that
They
contract.
would work. It would be a normal workday for custodians.
Correct. So the point of doing this wasn't to have a thought exercise. It was more just to surface that this is something that we will have to address through our collective bargaining process, which is ongoing.
Fair enough. Okay. Amy, please go ahead.
I am very much in support of a September 3rd start for the next school year as opposed to an August 28th start. And I think that our committee needs to have a conversation about what we would do in the event that Labor Day was on the 7th, which will happen in 2 years. Thinking about already having added Lunar New Year to the calendar, potentially considering other additions to the calendar. I don't know that I'm ready to have a really nuanced conversation about when we might decide to begin before Labor Day, but I do think we need to have further discussion about that particular topic. I would also just add a question about 182 days of school and whether, in the event of a snow day or other unplanned cancellation, those 181st and 182nd days would be made up.
So since they're not required by DESI, and if we ran out of running room, we would not make them up,
Okay, thank you.
which is no worse than what has occurred over the last life of your contracts.
Thank you. That seems logical. And just hearing you say that, Amy, maybe this is the discussion for the school committee to have, not for settling this year's contract, or next year's contract, I should say, but, sort of implementing a.
Calendar, not contract.
Calendar.
Yes, sorry, force a habit.
We're done doing that for now.
It's been a long couple weeks. In terms of not determining next year's calendar, but thinking about it as, I don't know if there's a, rule of thumb we operate under that it's, if Labor Day is after the 4th or 5th or something, I'm not suggesting that, I'm throwing that out there, just thinking out loud, that, the school committee would likely start before Labor Day, and that way that would give folks some sense of certainty looking in the future as they're making plans around all the things they're making plans around that last week of August, first week of September.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
think people are craving predictability despite understanding that change is in the wings. And so giving people something to understand in advance seems really important.
Mr. Chair, we can certainly bring you some draft calendars for the next 2 school years, just as an exercise before the year ends, so that there's the discussion long in advance.
That would be
Okay.
great.
Yeah, I mean, I think we want to give folks as much lead time as we can so that, we're not having this discussion in February of, is school going to start before or after Labor Day every year? That's a lot of pressure on folks. Go ahead, Emily.
Is that something that would be appropriate for the policy committee? Because that would be, I would assume, a policy change on our part.
Well, if you enacted an if-then decision-making tree, you would need to enact it in policy.
That's my point. Yep.
Something to consider. I'm not, I'm thinking about this in real time. I'm guessing not advocating for or against that, but I think that's a fair consideration. Do we make that a policy? Or is it going to be a softer rule of thumb and we try to, we could even, 1 year in advance, determine the start date of the calendar without having to determine the full calendar. Oh, it's in that middling territory of it's September 6th. We can say school's going to start, and we don't even have to figure out the rest of it, but give people certainty at least on that start date. Another thought, a policy might just be the easiest way and simplest way to, it's cut and dry.
Yep.
Camp enrollment for the youngsters starts at the end of September, and people are already planning their vacations at that time for the end of the summer. So I think having something that's clear-cut and people understand feels really important.
Great, she said.
Okay. All right, is there other thoughts? We do have a motion, so if there's no other, yep, go ahead, Mayor Foley.
Can I just clarify? I think all of us feel this particular November election, it makes a lot of sense to follow the superintendent's guidance, but I think it may be worth repeating. That does not mean 2 years ago, 2 years later, when there's just state elections and municipal elections, that she would necessarily recommend it then, or maybe even depending on future presidential. So it's certainly for 2024, but it's not a policy necessarily
About
going
every election
forward.
day.
Right, correct.
Right.
It is not a forever election policy.
Yes, and-
I will continue to advocate for a full day of professional development for our staff, but I will do that in concert with our union partners.
Great, thank you. And sorry if I was confusing. I was referring to the policy solely on the,
Yep.
what's the inflection point of before or after Labor Day, not on Election Day. I do, I share Dr. Nolan's concerns, particularly around this particular presidential election, this particular year, and don't mind acting in a little bit of caution.
Can I ask another question about 182 days? I'm having a hard time with it. And I think it would help for me to hear some context about why we have 185 days in our calendar and how those days were considered before this, and how we see those additional 2 days in June having a meaningful impact on students.
So my understanding, this is sort of an unusual thing I've never seen before. So
Neither.
there are 182 potential student days, 180 of which have always been worked. There are 3 teacher conference days, which are professional development, get ready for school, and 1 day after schools gets out for staff to close down the year. Those 2 years have not been enacted by the committee in any way, but the teachers are paid for them as if they are student-facing work days.
And I think it brings up the point as well that for our Unit C folks who are hourly, that would be incremental cost, if I'm not mistaken.
It would not.
It would not, okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for
every
clarifying that.
unit is paid for that time period
Yep, okay.
already.
Perfect, thank you for clarifying that.
Okay.
I mean, look, I think there is an element of, it's something new, something that hasn't been done here in at least in my time being involved. Emily, you're usually like the historian here.
Not that I'm aware of.
Not
no.
that you're aware
I
of
think it's been
either.
like this for a long time.
You know, I mean, I think if you talked to, you know, your average family, given the amount of learning loss that has occurred over the last couple years, and, you know, I would say from my personal perspective, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world that we have an extra 2 days and let's utilize them and let's do it right.
Yeah, I mean, I would qualify that my concerns are not ideological or pedagogical, they are logistical, because I see families really struggling to get students to school on June 15th. And so I see further logistical challenges here and challenges with staff buy-in as well. And so that doesn't mean that I don't support increased learning time. I definitely do. But I'm a little worried about how this will be received by families and faculty.
If I could just add, just a perspective from potentially some of our more low-income families. Not everyone can afford camps in the last 2 weeks of June in those traditional summertime scenarios. And added school time backing up to the 4th of July holiday, but before our summer school programming occurs, does actually meaningfully fill time for young people and give them educational experiences. I have full faith that our educators are going to make June days productive. And if that's the message we all send, that these are productive days and they should be, it helps us to work against all those requests for compensatory services and make-up days and all the things that have been lost. Also, you can vote not to do it if that's what you decide. So you might want to take it up separately. My job is to get you the bang for your buck. And it sounds to me like parents are worried about how many days have been lost this year and other years, and particularly elementary folks just worrying, are my kids on grade level? So I offer it as a possible solution.
Okay? And so to be clear, the motion that was put forward was to approve draft number 3, which begins the student school year on Tuesday, September 3rd, the day after Labor Day. It has the district closed on November 5th, Election Day. It includes Lunar New Year as a holiday. It has 182 student school days with a forecasted last day for students on June 24th with 4 snow days that would move that to June 30th. And per Dr. Nolan's comments, you would have effectively 2 days of wiggle room there because we would have 182 days that you could pull back to 180 days with 6 snow days and still finish on June 30th as required by law. Is that a good
That's
summary?
Correct.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you. If there's no further comments, we can vote. Okay. We'll do a roll call vote on the motion by Paul that was, I had it written down. Thank you.
Unthing.
Yes. Motion by Paul, just seconded by Unping. There it is. Thank you. Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2 is yes. Ward 3.
Yes.
Ward 4.
Yes.
Ward 5.
Yes.
Ward 6.
Yes.
Ward 7.
Yes.
Ward 8.
Yes.
And Mayor Fuller.
Yes.
All right, that passes 9-0, and we look forward to September 3rd. All right. Next agenda item is a enrollment overview, and I believe Dr. Hoag is joining us for this?
Yes, welcome Dr. Katie Hoag, who is our Chief of Research and Data. This ushers in all the report conversations that you asked for way back in the fall, thinking about enrollment, long-range planning, facilities. I've asked Dr. Hoag to speak at a high level because Dr. McKibben is coming on the 26th with his enrollment recommendations. The more information you have to have a deep discussion after McKibben's presentation that keeps Dr. Hoag's recommendations and analysis in mind starts to set the table for the kinds of long-range planning decisions you need to make. It also is a backdrop for the school choice discussion. So they're all very intermingled here, and that is our next discussion with Mr. Hurley here to speak to us about that. So Dr. Hoag, take it away.
Hello. So as Anna said, typically I would be presenting this. This is last year's book. This is forthcoming. We will print a copy for you, and you will get it towards the end of the month. But tonight I'm going to present on the abridged version that you received. So it's a shortened memo. It is rather long, but most of the pages contain tables, not text. So I hope that wasn't too daunting. Sorry for the length. Lisa, I do have a presentation. Okay. No, I know we don't typically do presentations, but I do have a few graphs that I want to share to talk through. Oh, thank you.
So we did have one member question about this report. I just want to read it, and Dr. Hoag has worked it into her presentation. And that question was, this year, grade level CSRs in grades 5 to 6 and 8 to 9 show a shift from recent years. Can we hear more about that and provide additional context about why? And what is the source of data for the FY29 projections? So she's going to speak to those in this presentation.
And
Yep.
just to clarify for folks, CSRs would be cohort survival ratios. In other words, how much of one class moves on to the.
I will talk about that. So I know we have some new members, so not everyone has heard me do this spiel before, so I will talk about those.
Spiel away, Katie.
so-
80
all
people
right.
on Zoom were wondering what the heck she was talking
Yep,
about.
I will talk about what that means in the presentation or in my discussion right now. So I'll start by just noting that I did a preliminary enrollment presentation in October. Our final FY24 enrollment has shifted down by 4 students from that preliminary enrollment. We had 2 students at the high school level who did not return this fall, but were included in preliminary because the school was still following up with those students. And then there were 2 students, one in high school and one in elementary school, who withdrew prior to October 2nd, but the withdrawal was processed late. So our total final enrollment for this, official enrollment for this year was 11,596 students. This is a decline of 1% from last year, which is slightly larger than the decline that we projected last January. Last January, I was projecting enrollment for the fall that would be a decline of negative 0.8%, but we actually saw a negative 1%. So the actual decline we saw was 33 students more than what was projected last year. All right, so I'm going to jump ahead to this slide. So one of the measures of error that we look at for our projections is the variance from projection. So this compares the actual enrollment to the projected enrollment 1 year prior, and this provides a measure of the variance. So the graph on this slide is showing the variance from our projections from 1 year prior for the district and by level, so for elementary, middle, and high school. So the purple line is the district 1 year variance, the blue line is elementary, red is middle, and green is high. With the exception of the COVID years, which you can see on this graph it's a big dip here. So that means the enrollment was much lower than what was projected for those years. So with the exception of those 2 school years, our district variance from projection has averaged 0% over the time frame in this graph, so from 2014 to 15 to now. And it's ranged from negative 1.4% to positive 0.6%, indicating that the actual enrollment that we've had has been very close to our projection. This year, our district variance is negative 0.3% from what was projected last year. By level, there is slightly more variability, although all 3 levels have been within plus or minus 2% from projection, again, with the exception of those 2 COVID years. So here's where I'll talk about the CSRs. So our well, first I'll step back for a second. This year we used a similar projection methodology that we've used in recent years to project grades 1 through 12 and for kindergarten. So in grades 1 through 12, we used a modified 5-year average cohort survival ratio, or a CSR, by grade and by building. So these modified 5-year average CSRs use enrollment data from 2023, 2022, 2021, and 2019, omitting 2020 because it's the COVID year. So it's a 5-year range span, but we omit 2020 because it was very low in that year. So the CSR, or the cohort survival ratio, compares the number of students in a particular cohort for the current school year to the number of students who were in that cohort in the prior year. So as an example, the Ainger grade 2 to 3 CSR for this year would compare the number of students in grade 3 at Ainger this fall to the number of students in grade 2 at Ainger last year. A CSR that's over 1 indicates that there's growth in that cohort, so more students are coming in than are leaving. A CSR under 1 would mean that the cohort is declining, and a CSR of 1 indicates stability. So it's not necessarily it's exactly the same students, but the total has remained the same. So in our methodology, we calculate these CSRs by grade and by building for each year, and then we average them across those 5 years, omitting 2020, to arrive at the modified 5-year average CSR that we use for the projections. So once we have those modified 5-year average CSRs by cohort and building, we apply them to the current year's enrollment of resident students in each school and grade to calculate next year's enrollment. And then we add non-resident students and students that we're projecting from permitted residential developments to each school and grade level projection. And then we aggregate them up to arrive at the district and grade level totals. We use those same CSRs then by school and building to project the following year's enrollment by applying them to the projected enrollment for FY25. It's FY24. So we take the projected FY25 numbers, apply the CSRs, our modified 5-year average CSRs, to those projections to get the FY26 projections, and then continue that through all 5 years of the projection. This allows us to use historical enrollment patterns to predict the future. The table that's on this slide is showing the cohort survival ratios by grade at the district level for the past 5 school years. So they're shown by grade spans. So you can see the first column is showing the cohort survival ratio for grades K to 1 up through grade 11 through 12. If you're curious about more years of data, they're in the report on page 34. So this year, we saw a shift in the average CSR at the district level for grades 5 through 6 and for grades 8 through 9. So if you look at this table, the first red column that says 5 through 6, you can see in recent years, we've had a decline in cohort size, meaning that we've had more students leaving than students coming in. That was not true this year. We actually saw growth in the cohort from grade 5 to 6, which is different from our typical pattern. And that is partially the reason why we have that is mainly the reason why we have a larger than projected middle school class this year overall, which is due to the larger than projected 6th grade. We have 27 more students in grade 6 than we projected last year because we were using our typical pattern of having cohort decline from in that grade cohort. So it appears that shifts in enrollment decisions, so both students who would have left for private school after grade 5 appear to have left earlier in the pandemic. We had many fewer students leaving NPS for private school after grade 5 this year than we typically do. And we had a higher than typical number of students entering in grade 6. So those two factors combined account for this higher than normal CSR in grades 5 through 6. So because of this shift in the pattern, in the projections, we've modified our modified 5-year average CSR by building for grades 5 through 6 to make them slightly larger based on the assumption that we'll see a similar pattern to this next year. And we think that's possibly likely because this year's 5th grade students were in 2nd grade during the 2020 to 21 school year, where we did see a lot of students, especially in the early elementary grades, leave for private school and not return. So it seems likely that we may see this type of pattern next year. For grades 8 through 9, if you look in the first column that is blue in this chart, that's showing the CSRs for grades 8 through 9. You can see in 1920, so pre-pandemic, we had a CSR of 1.05 indicating growth in this cohort. And again, if you take a look at page 34 in the report, you can see many more years. That's pretty typical for Newton. During the pandemic and last school year, we saw smaller growth in this cohort of students. So you can see we still saw some growth, but not as high as we typically see. And this year, it seems to be returning to pre-pandemic patterns. So more students are coming back for high school or coming into the district for high school. So again, because of this shift in the pattern, we've modified the grades, the CSRs for both high schools for grades 8 through 9 to be slightly higher, with the assumption that this pattern will continue next year as people are starting to return to those pre-pandemic trends. So that covers how we project grades 1 through 12. Kindergarten is done differently. Our kindergarten projections are historically the most variable because we don't have current enrollment data for this cohort of students. This year, as we've done in recent years, we used an adjusted 3-year average of the prior kindergarten classes by building to project the kindergarten classes for the next 5 years. This uses resident kindergarten enrollments from 2023, 2022, and 2021, so it omits the COVID year as well. We then add non-resident students and students projected from new developments to the average projections that come from averaging the prior 3 years. And then we take that total number of projected kindergarten students and compare it to the number of births for residents of Newton 5 years prior to calculate a birth to kindergarten ratio. We compare that ratio to the recent historical ratios that we've seen in Newton to determine if it looks like it's too high or too low. And if they are too high or too low compared to recent experience, we adjust the kindergarten projection either up or down. So next year's kindergarten class is being compared to the resident births from 2019. In 2019, the number of resident births in Newton was low compared to the years before it and the years after. It's just a year that has a smaller number of births. So because of this low number of births, our projected kindergarten class for next fall had to be adjusted down to arrive at a ratio that's more similar to recent experience. We did this adjustment by building, and that adjustment was proportional to the percentage of housing in each elementary school district, and considered the number of apartments in each district, the number of home sales by district, as well as the number of homes that are currently for sale in each elementary district over the past 5 years, and data that we've collected on siblings from Registration Gateway. So we have a sense of, not everybody provides that information, but we do ask families who are registering to provide us with sibling, date of birth, and name. We also made adjustments to the K projection in FY26 and FY27, adjusting it down in the same manner to bring the ratios for those years in line with recent experience. So if you're curious about what those ratios look like, they're on page 14 of the report. So based on these two methodologies, the projected enrollment for the district for next year indicates a decline of 0.6% or a decline of 74 students. This is due to a projected decline in elementary school. So elementary is projected to decline by 2.2%, where the incoming kindergarten class is much smaller than the outgoing fifth grade class. Middle school next year is projected to remain stable, and high school is projected to grow by 35 students. So the next few slides look at the 5-year projections by school. This slide is looking at, the blue bar is showing the current year's enrollment by elementary school, and the red bar is showing the projected enrollment at each elementary school in FY29, so 5 years from now. In 5 years, elementary enrollment is projected to decline by 6% from today, so a decline of 272 students, as smaller kindergarten classes are entering the district and larger grade 12 classes are exiting. Most of the individual elementary schools are projected to decline in 5 years, although Countryside, Pierce, Ward, and Williams are projected to increase. For Countryside, Pierce, and Williams, the projected increase is due to new developments in those districts. So for Countryside, that's Northland and Northland Charlemont. For Pierce, it's Dunstan East, 1314 Washington Street, and the Family Aid Shelter. And for Williams, it's Riverside and the Family Aid Shelter, because that was voted to be a buffer. Ward's projected increase is due to the single classroom grade level that is currently in grade 1, moving on to middle schools by FY29 and being replaced by a 2-classroom kindergarten class. This slide is the same information for the middle schools. Middle school in 5 years overall is projected to decline by 1% from today, which is a decline of 36 students, as those smaller elementary classes start to move through to middle school. Bigelow is projected to increase due to the change in feeder patterns that began this fall. And Brown is projected to remain relatively stable due to new residential development in the Brown district. And then this last slide is showing the same information for the 2 high schools. In 5 years, high school is projected to decrease by 2% from today, so a decline of 77 students, as the larger cohorts that we currently have that are around 1,000 students graduate and get replaced by smaller cohorts coming from the middle schools. But this decline is not consistent across the 2 schools. North is projected to decline by 7% from this year, so a decline of 146 students. And South is projected to grow by 69 students, or growth of 4% from this year. This is due to the new residential development on the south side, and this brings the 2 schools closer together in enrollment as originally intended. So I just wanted to give you a sense of the planning work that is underway right now. The K census is underway in the district. If anyone's watching and hasn't filled it out, please do. It's really helpful for us to start the planning now. We also, a few years ago, moved to online registration with Registration Gateway as our software, which is really helpful. It allows us to have much better monitoring of our incoming enrollments through the spring and over the summer, which we do. So we monitor registrations through spring and summer to help plan for classrooms for the fall. And we are also currently conducting the private school census for the current year right now. So we're getting rosters from private schools for resident students in Newton who are attending private schools across the state and in other states as well. So that is all I have for now. I'm happy to answer questions.
Did want to just add that Dr. Hoag has given me all of our private school census, and I will be reaching out to those individuals just to talk about why they are where they are and what that could mean and what their future plans are. They have no obligation to meet with me, of course, but I figured it's worth asking.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Hoag. Questions? On Ping, go ahead.
Thanks very much. And this might be a little bit layman's question, talking about CSR, cohort survival ratios. Here, we're not really talking about exact students compared to, starting from K1 to 1-2. For example, we have 100 students in K1, and then by the grade 1-2, we still have 100 students. But we do not say those 100 students in grade 1-2 happen to be the same 100 students in K1, right? That could be.
Correct, right.
But
So-
otherwise, you have a lot of data to show everybody, same name, same birthday.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's just, the CSR is compared just total enrollment for a particular building and particular grade level
Yeah.
from one year to the prior year. So even, they may be the same, it may not be the same students, because we do have students leave and come in throughout the year everywhere.
So,
Katie,
okay.
can you stop the screen share
Oh,
just so
yes.
everybody
Sorry.
can see? Okay.
So in that sense, of course, the cohort, how do you define the cohort? Sometimes you think, oh, cohort means same group of people. But here, we're talking about number. Okay, thanks.
And we're talking about the group of students who are in a particular grade level at a particular school. That's the grade,
Yeah.
that's the cohort.
the total number. The other question came up during the past few weeks, and I don't know if it's related here, but let me just throw the question because I was looking for the source. I heard a number of people say that in Newton we have 20% of families have kids in public schools. Some of my network parents question about that. How could only about 20% of families have kids in public schools? But I said I heard a couple of people mention that. So if you happen to know that, I appreciate that.
I do not. What I do know is based on the 2020 census, the federal 2020 census, there are about 33% of households that have school-aged children in Newton. But that does not mean that they all attend public school. It's just that they have school-aged children. We typically have between 18 to 20% of students who live in Newton attending private schools, so 20% seems reasonable. But I don't know that for certain.
Okay.
It does change a little bit each year, but roughly, it's a logical and pretty good rule of thumb that of the households where there are voters, about 20% of them of those households have students in the Newton public schools. It does change a little bit year by year, but that is very much directionally correct. There's a whole bunch of people who their kids have aged out of the Newton public schools, so they're former parents, if that makes any sense. So there's a lot more people who have had their children go through the Newton Public Schools.
Yeah, I was looking for that. And of course, during the COVID years, and we had, certain percentage of families who send their kids, pull their kids out of public schools and to private schools. So this percentage probably will even go down a little bit. But regardless, if you or Katie, if you happen to find our source, I'd like to know, because some parents demanded. You said 20%. Show me, where did you find this? And I apologize. I said I heard folks mention that. So thanks.
You want Ping? Any other questions? Amy?
I just want to add that I think a 33% is a more meaningful number if you're thinking about how many families have school-aged children. I think regardless of where you send your child, you're a parent or a caregiver no matter what, and I think that that's a number that we should be thinking more about than 20%.
Thank you. Rajiv?
Couple of things. Just a quick calculation, if it's 33% and we think about 80% of students do come here, it's about 26%. So I have no idea where a 20% number came from.
20% are at private.
Exactly. I have heard that, and I think that's pretty consistent from what we've heard previously. So Unping, your network might be getting erroneous information from somewhere, just possibly. The other question I had was actually on the first slide. Is that a variation in a one-year projection? It is.
Yes.
Okay, so what we see here actually doesn't apply to the following charts, because that's a
No.
5-year projection.
Correct.
Thank you.
And I will say our variance from projection further into the future gets larger, mainly because of the kindergarten and the fact that we don't have really great information other than the number of births to project the kindergarten class.
Just more spread as
Yes.
we go further.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes, Amy.
You noted that the second grade numbers dipped and that you thought a similar pattern would happen next year and that you'd adjust accordingly. Do you think a similar thing is going to happen the year after next, or are you just really thinking about next year?
Can you clarify? Sorry, the second
Yeah,
grade?
when I asked about the variance in
Yeah.
CSRs and you talked about people leaving earlier than they typically did
Oh.
and not coming back.
Yes.
You think that will happen again next year?
Yes.
Do you think that will happen? Like, what's the shelf life on how long that will keep happening?
Yeah, so, I don't know.
Get that crystal ball out,
Yeah,
can
I
you?
would say, so, right, the current fifth graders were in second grade. So next year's fifth graders were in first grade, so that would be 2 years out. And the next year's fifth graders were in kindergarten. So that's possible. And so possibly for 3 years, and then I don't know, because those children would have been in preschool during that COVID year. So that is why we do these every single year. And we rewrite this report every year because things do shift. So we feel the 1 year, like Rajiv was saying, the graph that I showed was showing the variance from projection for 1 year, which is pretty close. The further out we get, there is a lot more variation because kindergarten is harder to project, and people change, like patterns of enrollment do shift. So redoing the projections every year captures those changes and allows us to correct for those shifts and decisions that people make. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you very
Great.
much, Dr. Hoag, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
All right, our next agenda item is a second school choice discussion. Are you,
Yep, Liam Hurley's our closer this evening, and he's here because of his scintillating understanding of school choice. What we did was took the transcript of your prior meeting and every question you asked, and we made the frequently asked questions document that is before you. We certainly can walk through that. Liam and I felt like that was a lot to do, and that there was a request from Tamika to be able to have a deeper discussion about this, which was a request that I think Emily made before that. So we have scheduled, after our McKibben presentation on the 26th, a workshop setting for the school committee to discuss both the McKibben report, Katie's enrollment report, and the school choice scenario as they are all interwoven together. So happy to highlight anything. I think the big news here is the types of special education reimbursements that Liam has investigated and talked about. So Liam, I'll let you talk about the things you wanted to prioritize here.
Sure, yeah, and you have a presentation, but really it's the same presentation we had last time. So rather than going through that, I think focusing on the questions. One of the more scintillating documents is the special education cost increment calculator that you all have here. We did spend a bit of time, actually with our special education department, with Casey and Amanda Collins, just looking at that. And we wanted to get a sense. I mean, there was a lot of questions, I think, coming to us about Newton's a great district. We have fantastic special education services. What's going to be the uptake from families outside of Newton coming into Newton and, receiving some of those special education services? This same form is used for our circuit breaker. Thank you, Lisa. The same basically cost calculator is used for circuit breaker. The big difference between school choice and circuit breaker is there is no threshold. And so that's why the term circuit breaker is there. So that threshold now is above $51,000. So until costs exceed $51,000, they don't kick in. So we took a look at some students.
Liam, can I just clarify
Yeah.
that that's in circuit breaker, not applying to school choice? School choice, it just comes to us with no threshold.
With no threshold, thank you, Dr. Nolan. So no threshold at all. So zero threshold, any cost, any increment that we put in, they would come to us. They have their rate sheet and their hourly rates that they put in for us. So we took a look and we pulled out some, and obviously we want to keep any of these students anonymous. We looked at some students that we have in district that do not meet the circuit breaker threshold, that's $51,000. We came up with about $170,000 of reimbursement that we would get currently from those students that we're currently not getting. That's just an example of how school choice. So when I talked a little bit more in depth with Amanda Collins, she thought that the cost calculator for many of the services would get 100% of our costs reimbursed. There are a few categories. I think the aid rate potentially would be lower than what our rate is. She thought in some of these cases it would be approximately 90% of our cost. So there are a lot of different things. There's a lot of different ways that we need to basically kind of put in for these services. There's a variety of services that we offer depending on the student's IEP. But I thought that was very, very interesting information that we had. I want to reiterate again, we went back and we talked a lot about out-of-district tuition. I think Rob O'Donnell, who joined us from DESE, all those costs, 100% of those costs, we are reimbursed for. So if there is a student, and it sounds like it's really very rare, 100% of those costs are reimbursable by the district. And again, a reminder that transportation is not provided by the district. So if there was any students whose IEP, again, the sending district would have to pay that. So I can go on, but I think maybe if there was some specific questions or at the, after the 26th, but there's a lot of information here that I tried to dig into. I think there's a number of kind of big topics that we tried to group these into. So I'm happy to try and get into that.
So one of the pieces that came up just in my chats with seeing school committee members over the last several weeks is worry about where school choice would land. So two main issues, the volatility of controlling school choice. So how many slots do we open? How can we be sure that it's not unmanageable? The special ed costs were obviously, potential special ed costs were requested. And so in this packet, a proposed way of approaching this, it's number 4 in your Q&A document, of a hypothetical number that would do a few things. So that, we already have a contractual benefit which has been clarified even further in our new teacher's contract about students coming who are children of our staff. And we love that benefit. I'm so thrilled to be able to have that as a piece to attract folks to work here. So we tried to think about, what could we do to recoup school choice monies plus incremental special ed. And here was a model that we thought we could recommend to you for FY25, which just dips our toe in the water on school choice to see what it would feel like. And certainly, you're not making that decision today, just a model for your contemplation. The other concern that was brought up by many members was do the school choice slots compete and therefore bump out slots for METCO students? And I just want to be clear that they're two separate pipelines of choice within the Mass DESI way of doing business. And at this time, now for a second year, the METCO funding is going to be stable, and they are not opening up expansion scenarios for METCO. So the number of students that we have in METCO right now is the number. And I've pushed on this pretty hard because it's a valuable program, and considering the declines in enrollment, I was asking about METCO before I was asking about school choice. But there is no capacity to receive additional reimbursement on METCO or per pupil costs over and above what we have, which was disappointing for us and other Metro West communities, because I'll use my former district as an example. We used to have 60 students, and then it went down to 40 for a time due to changes in the enrollment process, and they would no longer let us go up to 40. So Newton's in the same boat. We have 200 students approximately, but we couldn't go more even if we wanted to right now through that program. So that's not to say school choice might not attract Boston residents, but it wouldn't include the transportation from Boston. So just wanted to be clear, they're sort of two separate pieces, and as we go through Advocacy Day with the State House and all of those things, we'll continue to advocate for more METCO slots if we're allowed to expand, but right now they're not expanding. I think Westwood was in the similar situation. That's where Amy is a high school principal. They were denied that as well.
One of the things I would just point out in this chart that we have here, it's a pretty, relatively, 10 to 13 slots. In speaking with Dr. Hoag, we were specific in not recommending a school. So this is just district-wide in terms of number of seats, not huge numbers. And we did check in with DESI. We would be able to be in a position where we would not have to actually make that recommendation to a school if a family was to accept until actually August time. So one of the keys I think that I kind of going to glean from looking at the school choice, really the goal is to try to basically fill unfilled seats and look at not creating new classrooms. And then this becomes an exercise in trying to think about the marginal cost to having these seats. So if there was two people sitting next to me right now, the lights are on, the heat is on, we don't need a new custodian, we don't need a new principal to the building. What are the marginal costs that we need for that? Certainly if we had two classrooms and we needed to add a third classroom to the building, that's a big cost. We now have a teacher, we may now need to add paraprofessionals. What does that do to the school budget in terms of adding those costs? So this is just a model. Again, this is not a final recommendation, but just kind of a lens to kind of take a look at and kind of how we were thinking about that. So I can see Chris and Emily are ready to ask me some questions.
I just wanted to talk about volatility for a second because it came up, a few members mentioning it to me. So school choice is your yearly choice. So each year, if you ever agree, you have to take a vote whether to open it or not. So, this is something that you could try for a year and then decide, nope, not for us. And then we would have the students who were entered into that initial beta year until they aged out or moved out of the district. So you have a lot of choice and control here. And, as the money people, we just feel an obligation to bring this forward as a way that we might bring additional resources to the district and still maintain the same students that we have here and possibly expand if that is something that you want to consider given the enrollment trends that we're seeing. Certainly some systems do it, some systems don't. Metro West is having the same discussions that we are, in that lots of our counterparts are closing schools, they're combining schools, they're seeing that drop in birth rate. Massachusetts has the lowest birth rate in the nation, and then Metro West is even lower than other parts of Massachusetts. So this piece about kindergarten projections that Dr. Hoag just mentioned could be our future, and we may not have dropped to the threshold where we're ready to close buildings yet, but this could stay the tide for us for a while and help us in this time where our budget is under stress. So anything to add to that?
No, I think you said it well.
One point of clarification I think I would just like to make based on your comments. In the concept of, you can open it, you can not continue with it. tell me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is, that means anyone we accept in, those are our students.
Correct.
And we will see them through to
That is
the
right,
end,
yes.
And we're not gonna kick
I
people
mean,
out of
not
Lincoln at
asking
that.
for new
Yes, we
enrollees,
wouldn't
yes.
expand enrollment beyond
Nope.
the students we enrolled that first year.
Correct.
So just everyone's clear about
Yeah.
that. I think, that,
Mm-hmm.
I
Just
presume
one-
that's how it would all sit with us, that we.
One question on
Yes.
that particular point. We would continue, if we close it the next year, continue to receive the revenue associated with those.
Correct.
That's
students.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
as
right.
long as the students are in the
Right.
program, then yes, we will receive that annual revenue related to those number of students.
Okay.
And from our perspective, I think, it's our responsibility. We own them at that point.
Mhm.
Yep.
Questions? Tamika, please.
Thanks, Chris. So, and thanks, Liam. I'm trying to think how to kind of capture what I'm thinking about here. Liam, you mentioned that this is a space available program, and that we would hold seats that are empty currently open and available for enrollment for students through school choice. So that seems to preclude adding any students through school choice in the high schools, since I know we're having capacity issues at the high schools, and that we're currently targeting hiring additional staff to alleviate some of the constraints on class sizes and capacity of students to select particular electives. So talk about that for a moment, because that seems to me as a disconnect. So I'm not quite sure, especially looking at the handy chart that we have here of the potential model. How would we approach high school as a vehicle for school choice?
Sure. So I think that's a good point. I mean, I think high school is probably our area of risk. We still have high enrollments at our high school. I would say particularly compared to our elementary and our middle schools. These have stayed high. They are projected, if you've seen these charts, they are projected to start to come down over time. And as we have, if we were to accept school choice and those students came in and it created larger class sizes, that has a detrimental, that has an impact.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be feedback we could take and we could revise that model. Keep in mind, these numbers, though, we have a number of these students, again, if a percentage of these, and I think that's going to be one of the keys to looking at this, is that if a percentage of these are our staff kids, they're already in our building. So there would be a percentage of these students that are in our building that may be accepted through school choice. So then it's just what's that differential of incoming students that I think would be coming in. But I think that would be up to the committee if they wanted to say, high schools is a risky proposition for us. We already feel some pressure. We feel some class sizes are a little too high. Let's limit the amount of what we want to bring into the school, into the high schools. That's certainly, certainly something we can look at, and certainly something that's that's the committee's, purview to change that recommendation. We don't want to, create undue pressure. Again, this is, I think, maybe almost 50 students across 2 high schools. High level perspective for me, that's not a huge amounts of number, but any amounts that push some of these high class sizes is not a good thing. So that would be an area of risk, I think, for us.
You
I wanna-
can, you
oh,
can
go ahead.
curate whatever seats you would like to open. So you can say, I'm opening 1 in 9th grade or 0 at the high school level. So it's completely up to you based on your analysis.
So I just want to drill down a little bit more into your response, Liam, because kind of central to that structure is the assumption that the 50 spots that we are holding open, that a large proportion, if not the majority, would be claimed by currently enrolled students of our staff. However, if we're holding open school choice, and this is Newton, and we are a premier district that offers wonderful, renowned, state-of-the-art special education services, I think it would be a disservice for us to assume that we wouldn't be at the peak level of interest for folks who are looking to either jump from a different district where they currently participate in school choice to Newton, or from a district where they're not happy with the quality of education they're receiving for attending Newton. So the potential for us to have this influx over and beyond the spots that we're holding open based on our staff, it seems to me that there's a real possibility that we will have to trigger a type of lottery system wherein we can't consider staff attendance or staff children's attendance as a factor. We can only consider whether siblings, we can have preferential status for siblings, but in this first year, there will be no siblings. So if we have to have a lottery, it's open and available to anyone. So the thinking of having current students doesn't necessarily hold if we have an influx.
If you have an influx of students, I totally agree. And again, I can't sit here and tell you, and I think that's going to be some of the analysis we're going to try to look at in terms of thinking how many students actually we think would actually want to come here. I don't have a great sample size. I'm trying to think about my high school daughters, trying to think, you're going to go to a new high school. I think that the older the student gets, it is more difficult, but there's certainly many real reasons that many high school students and many families would want to say, let's go to a Newton North or Newton South. It certainly is an attractive option to me, so I don't want to dismiss that. So it's something, again, though, that I think that we could control for. Maybe we limit that number down significantly. Maybe it's 0. Or we think about some of the analysis of what's going to be the uptake of those students coming in. How do other districts handle that? So I think it's a fair point.
So one last and final thought. Really, it's more around the fact that even though we have this long, list of districts, some participating, some that don't participate, what strikes me is that none of the districts that we would consider our peers appear on this list, save for one. There was one that I found on the enrollment analysis Rolodex of schools, I think Burlington. And I don't even know if that's a comparable district to Newton for a whole host of reasons, but they do participate, and none of the others that we consider ourselves against do. So that's something that kind of makes me just wonder, why is that? And relatedly, have we spoken with those districts that do participate and taken a sampling from them as to what are their experiences, what are the challenges? We obviously know what the benefits are, the additional funding into boost revenues, but I'm really interested in getting deep into the weeds of what are the challenges, what are the struggles of the program if we're to consider bringing a similar model here.
Sure.
And,
So
sorry, the workshop that, thank you, Anna, I
Yep.
think that's fabulous that we're looking to move forward on the workshop. It's really going to be a great way for us to just have more than the time allotted during a school committee packed agenda night to really get in depth into this topic.
I mean, I just want to share that for 10 years, this was my responsibility in Natick to manage this program. We had about 150 students every year that applied. There are challenges, there are benefits. I think people don't do it because they're worried about the volatility. They're worried for the exact reason that you just said, and they don't have the range of special ed in-house programming to shoulder it. So this is a very unique district in the comprehensiveness of those services.
Yeah, I would also just put too that the context over the last 5 years for districts, Newton is unique in its terms of its size, particularly elementary. There's not many schools, not many districts with 15 elementary schools, and I would say that over the last 5 or 6 years, most districts went through COVID and have been declining enrollment. I think that we would be probably ahead of the game. I think other districts would be looking at this as well as a tool, or they're thinking or have already done what Dr. Nolan was suggesting. They're looking at consolidation or closing of schools. Again, these are many districts or 4, 5, 6, 7 elementary type schools, so they don't have kind of the flexibility we have with 15 elementary schools. So I think this is a bit of a timing issue as Massachusetts and Newton kind of looks at what's ahead of us in terms of enrollment.
Rajiv?
So some comments, and Liam, these are not necessarily questions for you.
Okay,
Right.
that's all right.
So first, it's a little disturbing to me that this has become a big exercise in calculating special education costs. We've had a fair amount of what I would think of as scapegoating of special education in discussions in the community over the last 2 weeks during the strike, which has been very unfortunate. I do think the, 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 I guess the important element of special education as it pertains to this topic is that when you look at revenue, that doesn't imply net revenue. It really is, here's what would be coming in, and our expenses for those students, special education or not, are not going to be zero. They're going to range somewhere between $5,000 or maybe less than $5,000 and higher. So, I mean, there are a lot of calculators and other things around special ed. I hope we don't keep drilling into that as being the reason why people would come to Newton. What I do think is an issue is if you think about some of our surrounding communities, Newton would be an attractive school district, whether or not your child was a special education student. And I'm talking about like communities that border us. So I think what will happen, if I were to predict this, is that we would be significantly oversubscribed no matter how many positions we opened. And that would automatically lead to bumping out the students of our teachers, of our educators. Like that would be the number one immediate impact. If we want to open up 200 slots, get 2,000 people applying, we run a lottery in which there is no way to actually provide any kind of preferential number or committed spot for our educators' students, we're going to have a number of our educators' students bumped out and not have a position. I really would not want to take that on. That to me, that flies in the face of what we've had in place and what we have included in the most recent contract with our educators. And certainly, let me know if I'm reading this wrong, but I predict that that's what would happen. We'd be oversubscribed, we run a lottery, not everyone wins the lottery. The other concern I have is really related to what Chris said earlier, which is if you let in students, they are our students. Like we are committed to them. We don't send them away. If we let them in and we admit them at the elementary level or the middle school level, they are with us until they finish high school or potentially beyond. So at that point, we don't have the flexibility to adjust things. Like once they're in, and they should be. They should be our students once they're here. And that's some of the volatility that I see as being challenging because setting aside Massachusetts birth rates and so on, it's hard to predict. It's really hard to predict what our enrollment will look like 5 years from now. And with new development, with new zoning, with the fact that we constantly have new people coming to the Boston area, whether it's for a short period, for a medical fellowship, whether it's for a longer period, for some kind of business role, or any other reason. And I'm committed to Metco. Those are our students. I think adding another stream coming in that is almost certainly going to bump out our educator students, for me, is a non-starter.
So I don't know if you want to respond to that.
In terms of order of operations with kids?
How about the bump out students piece? I think that should be corrected.
So the first piece is that the staff kids have a contractual benefit that either way, so the order of operations would be staff students would be placed if they chose to put themselves in the school choice lottery. It's actually more protective to them in some ways than our contractual benefit, but it would not co-opt their contractual benefit. So we would have to make space for those young people. And then our school choice decisions would be independent of that around the placement of Metco and staff children.
Financial reflected. I thought the financial reflected that the students of our educators would be coming in with $5,000 a year for each of them.
That's if they're chosen in the lottery. So we would have to place them for their contractual benefit and let them know they were slated. But they would also apply for school choice. If they're chosen by the lottery, wonderful. If they're not, they're no worse off than they were being in the contractual benefit.
Just to play that through,
Mm-hmm.
you have an educator who wants her child to be in Newton Public Schools.
Mm-hmm.
If that child is placed to the lottery and doesn't get it,
Mm-hmm.
what happens? Because there are two possibilities here. One is we have to go back to school choice and say, oops, we need to take one spot away because we do need to provide a spot for a student that we hadn't counted as part of who we're bringing in and who went through the lottery, right? So we'd have to essentially reduce that number. Am I making sense? I can go through
So
that again.
you wouldn't need to, because we would make the timeline such that the staff placement would occur first. So they would already have their slot. We would then ask them to also put their application in for school choice. If they're picked, that's great, but they still have retained the slot that is here. So what the volatility that you cite is real in that whatever slots we open for school choice, we have to be okay with having to take the young person in the contractual benefit and another person in the slots that we have made available. So you have to reduce the number of slots before you even open it in order to accommodate for what we just talked about. We can't count on the staff kids getting picked, but there is a likelihood in the game of the lottery that they will be picked, and we are no worse off for that contractual benefit. The trick is the number that you authorize per grade level or class to open those choice seats. And that's a conversation that we would have after you see the McKibben report and Katie's recommendations. And we'd have to be really comfortable that there would be no, influx of students that we would need to take. And that's the dice you roll on school choice in any district.
Understood. And I'm not willing to roll the dice.
Yep.
And but also based on what you said, if we place 100 students who are the children of our educators, encourage all of them to apply for the 200 seats that are available for school choice.
Mm-hmm.
Suppose things work out really well and all of them get it. We then have a bunch of empty spots where we expected to have school choice students. Because we had come up with a certain number of spots that we made available.
Mm-hmm.
And we had students who had already been assigned seats. Followed by that, in terms of the sequencing, you then figure out, okay, we have an additional 200 that we could take that are incremental to the students of our educators. So you'll end up filling fewer of them. That's kind of the reverse volatility. It wouldn't cause as many challenges, but you could also end up in that situation.
You could, but you would also end up with monies for the students who already sit in your seats.
So I was kind of asking, I was actually having some of this discussion with Lynn today on some of the same questions, Rajiv, and I think the sense I'm getting is the structure of this, if it were to move forward, would be that you would only open seats to the extent you had capacity, whether there's a staff kid or not a staff kid, doesn't matter. Like, to the extent there's capacity, you would only consider seat, you're not gonna open seats that, like, hey, it's a 50% chance that a seat gets filled and then we're screwed. You're only gonna open those seats where there is open capacity. And so in terms of thinking about the financial impact, I think really the two variables are, what is the average cost of a child who would fill that seat, who is not a staff kid, because that kid's already in the status quo, right? We already own that kid, and that student will be rolling forward in MPS. So what is the average cost that we would estimate, marginal cost, both short term and kind of longer term, of a non-staff student who would fill that seat? And then what is the, ultimately, what do we think the applicant pool looks like for the seats? And that's the, you know, I think to Tamika's point, that's analysis that's yet to be done. And I think, you know, me and Liam have talked about some concepts as how we might put some kind of cuff on that. But then once you have those two variables, it's really just a mathematical exercise at that point. You're rolling dice, you're flipping coins to see how those seats are going to be filled. And, you know, that's at least, you know, somewhat predictable thing, across a meaningful size sample.
I don't agree with beginning of what you said, which is where we start out. If we know from based on input from our staff that there are going to be 150 students coming in, and I'm completely making up that number.
137 have it.
Good. So just to round up, 150 students, we factor that in before we look at school choice, but then we encourage all 150 of them to also apply through school choice. So some of which ends up in a situation where some get in, some don't, right? And also I don't think can mandate that there's an application through school choice because, or can we? Because if we don't do that, the safest path for any educator who wants to make sure their child is in there and not going through the hassle of applying would be to not apply through school choice.
I think Dr. Nolan.
Go against that, if
I
could.
I think
Please.
what Dr. Nolan was saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, a staff child will not be at risk of losing their seat
Correct.
because of school choice. So the answer would be, and in your example of 150, you would only open 150 school choice seats to the extent that there is capacity to fill 150 school choice seats outside of staff kids. The real number, it might be you can only open 100 because for 50 of those seats, you wouldn't want to risk that it's going to cause an overcrowded classroom. And for 100 of them, you feel comfortable that the capacity remains in the system. So, you know, I don't think I would want to move forward in an instance where you were thinking about this is going to really create very likely risks. And, you know, I would only consider it in the framework of there is excess capacity and you have to assume, you know, every one of those seats gets filled with a child who's not currently an NPS student. That's kind of the mindset I had.
Right. And just a reminder, as a point of order, children are baked into this projections, and we could further survey everyone to say, like, what's your plan for your future children? So just a couple pieces of info to help you with that.
So if I could speak real quickly to,
Right, Amy, did you?
hold on, it's to Rajiv's point about the contract
I think
provision.
he's speaking about how I had also tried to respond earlier,
Yes.
but it's fine. You can speak.
Okay,
Sure.
so Rajiv, per the contract, the provision for staff to apply to school choice, were the school committee to adopt it, is a mandatory one. It's not permissive. It means that all staff who currently have children enrolled in the Newton Public Schools have to apply for a spot for school choice if the school committee authorizes school choice.
Thank you. That's helpful.
I was just going to say, from a safety perspective, the fact that once your child is admitted from school choice is our child for their duration, regardless of your employment in the district, should you get an exciting opportunity that you want to pursue, or should something else change, I think is a pretty big incentive. And I'm not saying that to say anything about what I think about the proposal, but I don't think it's less safe to apply.
And what I was saying in that context is that it would be less safe to apply if you weren't already counted as part of as part of our population.
Right.
So apparently you would be, and then what we would offer for school choice would be 100% incremental to our educator student population, unless we were willing to roll the dice and assume that some percentage were making it. Mayor Fuller?
I see a different variability that's really difficult for us to plan for. School choice, let's say we open it now, let's say we put out 150 seats. Some of them are staff kids, some are not. And let's say we are avoiding the high school for obvious reasons, so we're taking kids K through 8. We're going to have those children, those students, some of them for 10, 12 years. I'm sure the school committee watched very closely. We've been through a difficult couple of years thinking through zoning and adding housing here. One of the complicated parts for the city council when doing it is we have roughly 32,000 housing units. We have just zoned as we had to meet a state requirement for an additional, it's approximately 8,400 by right units. There's a lot of discussion and disagreement. What percent of those 8,400 additional units will ever get built, and over what time frame? And thoughtful people have very different points of view. So that as Katie or Bill McKibben are thinking about what is the enrollment in the Newton Public Schools 10 years from now, when we've got housing changing and demographic trends in Massachusetts and the country also changing. And I think you'll hear Bill McKibben talk about turnover, how many of our residents are owned by people, let's say, 60 to 80 years old, and how many of those houses are going to turn over and be affordable to young families. So there's what I'm also struggling with is the permanence of whatever seats that we add. And when I do the math, if you add Metco plus the current students from staff, I think I did it right, but it's like 4.7% of our student body are those, and we're thinking of increasing it. Let's say it's going to go up to 6% of our student body, and we want to always have the Metco kids, and we're very committed to that program. And if seniors graduate, we want to add them back in kindergarten and first grade. And it's a fabulous way of attracting young families who are teachers to be in our school system. So we really want that. But doing the prediction, we do have to do what Chris outlined, average cost and how many seats will be things. But there's a whole other level of calculation that's complicated.
Go ahead.
It seems a little bit more complicated than we originally thought. But overall, I want to say, I would think Dr. Nolan proposed this idea is for money. Let's be honest. And certainly we help other families. You know, that's very noble things. Since our student enrollment is going down, that's projected already clearly. Now, in terms of Rajiv's the concern that the staff, if I understand correctly, say if we have 137 That's the staff students in our system. So they are contractually already guaranteed. However, we encourage them to apply for their district school choice program if their district is in this program. We don't know. Do we know what's the percentage out of 137 kids? Half, 2/3, possibly?
What's the percentage that would get accepted?
No, whether their district even in this school choice program.
They don't need to be.
Oh, they don't need to.
Mm.
Oh, that's something new to me. Thanks for
Good
mentioning.
question. Yep.
So 137, their parents, our school staff, they all have they can all apply for this school choice program, regardless whether their school district is, oh, that's something new to me. But one thing I understand correctly, they're guaranteed. Now we are thinking about incentive. Possibly some school staff say, why should I do that? If my kids are already guaranteed to have the space in Newton school system, why should I go through that? But one thing I understand, because if they apply the school choice program, then we will have $5,000 for their child. That's guaranteed $5,000 if regular students. Of course, if special needs students, I know Rajiv does not want to talk to focus on that part, but if then we will get incremental, a reimbursement. So we're not losing any money if that student happen to be the special needs student, because that's some certain concern. I heard that too, if they are special needs students. So do we have any incentive to ask staff to do that?
So there's a built-in incentive in that, let's say, I bring my children here, but I leave the Newton Public Schools to go somewhere else. School choice allows the child to stay, whether I stay or not.
Thank you. As a matter of fact, I did read that. I thought, oh, that's good. Because currently, as long as you're teaching in Newton school system, your kids have the right to attend Newton school system. But in a couple of years, you want to change, go to other district, then automatically your kid will lose that privilege to attend Newton school system. But if you join the school choice program, say you're a kindergarten teacher, or your kid is in kindergarten class, after a few years, you leave Newton school system, your child is guaranteed to finish until high school. I consider this as quite a big incentive, in this way, because I would not be surprised some staff, because of this privilege or this benefit, they just stay in the school system. Of course, you can think of incentive for this staff to stay in the school system because they have the benefits of their kid attending Newton school system. So I'm glad that we recognize that there is guarantee as long as your kids in the school choice program. But do they need to apply every year, or automatically if you apply, you're accepted by Newton,
It's one time.
then guaranteed
That's it.
all those years? Okay, well, that's good to know. Thanks. Thank you.
Be really quick, because I haven't weighed in on this yet. Just quickly, for me, too much volatility. I come from my comfort level. I think that there is a risk to high school numbers. I think we talk about enrollment going down, but 5 years from now, according to Katie's projections, South is going to be higher and not lower. So that's not true across the board. So I'm concerned about pressures of enrollment in high school. And that there may be unintended consequences that we're not even thinking about right now. So that's it.
Anyone else?
Just quickly follow up Emily's. If our school system, the student enrollment going down, high school student enrollment cannot go higher. Newton South might have more students, but Newton North certainly would go down to balance that because overall students are going down, right?
Right, but it's also taking a number of years to go from kindergarten with the lower enrollments to get through to the high school. It's not immediate and automatic. And I know that as they continue to go through, and yes, the numbers behind them coming in are going to be lower, but in terms of more immediate high school pressure, even if we're, because someone mentioned K-8, you know, 8's awfully close to high school. And I'm just concerned that the high schools are not immediately going down and once we have these kids, they're with us forever.
Yeah, logistically, certainly that needs some energy and resources to do that work. No doubt about that.
Okay. And remember, we will have a upcoming workshop on this to discuss some of these issues in more detail. Okay, if nothing else, thank you, Liam.
Oh, one more
and-
thing.
Q&A is really good.
This is quick, though.
The final agenda item.
Bring it home, Liam. Bring it home.
This is really good. We didn't say thank you. It really is really good.
A lot of questions.
Is an
Okay.
updated
We may have to
budget
go-
calendar, which we're clearly all riveted to hear
Yeah.
about.
Drill us, Liam.
Really the main point of this, we've actually moved things back a couple of weeks. So we have lost a couple of weeks with the contract, I would say. Me and the team have looked at this. So, and again, a few things could change. One thing I would just point out, I've highlighted a few areas here. I think previously, Dr. Nolan was going to be presenting kind of her budget presentation on March 4th. We've pushed that out to March 18th. And again, you may or may not want to do this, but we had this Dr. Nolan presenting and then actually going right into kind of the elementary and kind of secondary models. It may or may not work. Emily's giving me the eye. So that may or may not work. We still have enough time. I think one of the goals from my perspective is ultimately to try to have a vote before the April break. Mayor, I believe, Maureen let me know, I believe that the city council presentation is on April 16th. So I think that's the Tuesday during the break. So we can back into this. But I had put that March 18th, Dr. Nolan. I'm not sure if I don't know how long your presentation was going to be. We used to do an 8:30 a.m. We're not doing that anymore. So I think this was to try to kind of have Anna kind of segue us into this. So however we want to roll with that. But I had us kind of starting on the 18th, but we could adjust everything out, I think, a period from there. So we could have the elementary and secondary, if I'm reading the body language from Emily correctly.
Me as a talking head on 8:30 in the morning when no one can watch it, including the staff, just doesn't make any sense to me. So we need it at prime time. We need people to be able to hear it. And then to segue right into the sub budget, it just makes good sense. I am extremely brief in these matters. I'll be sharp.
I'm all for efficiency, so that's.
And Emily has a question, I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
So when will we get the budget books? Electronic or otherwise?
So we said on the 17th, Emily.
So on the same day that we would be deliberating the day before. Right.
So we'll work, if we can get it done before then, we would do that. But as I would say, we're up against it a little bit on my team. We have been fully dedicated right now to the contract, so we've now got to turn our attention. There's a lot of moving pieces.
We understand.
Yeah, okay.
It was in no way a
no.
reflection about the speed with which the
Yes.
stuff is going to be. I completely understand. And it was a huge, you are set back
Yes,
by
yep.
a number of weeks, and I completely understand that. Is there any flexibility at all on the city council April 16th date, or that's it?
We can look at it.
Just curious.
That's a vacation week, which is oddly enough not helpful to you guys. So that's often why we do it there, because the question I think for you is if you're trying to do it before vacation, but we'll work with you, and I suspect I can
And I might be the
move
only
back.
one who feels this way too. So, okay, I have somebody who's. Yeah.
One day to go through the very comprehensive budget book.
Yeah.
Liam, I know your team has been delivering for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I share the concern just in terms of being able to get through it, but it is what it is.
So I just want to say that previously you would have a presentation that was no public comment and no comment, like a taped. So it also doesn't have to be the only time that any portion of that is presented to you. So if we're framing the budget and there's sub-budget presentations, and then you have a chance to digest the book, we're happy to bring back anything in the public hearing or in a subsequent meeting that would allow you to feel more at ease about the presentations.
I would be at ease. I think I may not have been clear. When Liam and team get the budget books ready, I think all of us who've been here previously do our best to go through them and try and highlight areas where we have questions and so on, and generally try and get those to Liam and his team ahead of time, and then try to get to those kind of expeditiously in the presentations. A 1 day time period to get through that book is a little difficult,
Yeah.
but I fully appreciate what Liam and team have been doing for the last 2.5 weeks.
Yep.
And we will deal with it.
So I envision we'll utilize some sort of process like we used last year where we'll have, maybe a Google Doc or something where we can deposit questions directly, real time. Liam gets them.
Yeah.
Dr. Nolan will have them. And that way, we can make that a more fluid process. I think that worked pretty well last year.
Okay. Good to know.
The other option is we could all just gather for a couple days in Aisha's conference room.
Been there, done that. I don't want to do
I
that
did.
again.
Triggering folks in the room. Please don't.
Sorry. Too soon. Sorry.
The week of April 8th also might be an opportunity.
Yeah.
You have the vote on the Monday, that
Mondays.
whole week.
Yeah, so there's some more time in that week.
That would be
used,
great.
If that
Yeah.
helps. But again, I'm happy to look at April 16th if it helps somehow.
Yeah, I wanted to build on a little extra time, so there's some more time that week before the break.
Have by state law, the city council has 45 days to review, and President Laredo is really trying to have their vote before it's Veterans Day. I just want to make sure I'm picking the right holiday. So
That one's in November.
no, it's
Memorial
not.
Day.
It's Memorial Day. Thank you. Memorial Day. So that we were also working. So I think we'd have to, if you want to push back the 16th, we've got to work with
Yeah.
the city council.
If we could explore that, Mayor, it would be great. I mean, these folks have worked straight through. No one will have February break. I would really like them to be able to take a break if they can, and not have to be on for that. But I understand the constraints, so let us know.
Well, I'm not sure what I'm being asked yet, but we'll talk, Liam, tomorrow and figure out
Fantastic. Thank you.
what is ideal for you.
And Liam, if I could request that as much of the information from, larger data sets, charts, et cetera, in the book, if whatever you have available in Excel format to distribute to the members, that would make life a lot easier.
Sure thing, yeah.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Tamika, go ahead, please.
No worries. So as we're talking budget, first, Emily, Rajiv, I feel you. I need my book, and I love going through my book with a highlighter. That's not what I wanted to say. I wanted to draw our attention to a notation that was in the questions from the previous agenda item that we have approximately $2 million of risk and efficiencies, savings or revenues between now and the end of the contract with the NTA. I saw that and I thought that assumes that school choice might be one of the ways in which we address that. And so if the school committee authorizes school choice, we can certainly use those funds in that way. But through the budgeting process, I will be looking for alternative scenarios just in case the school committee does not approve school choice. So I just wanted to put that in the conversation as well.
Thank you. Any other comments on the budget? Okay, well, thank you, Liam.
Thank you.
I believe that concludes our business for this evening. I want to remind everyone, we do have a joint meeting with the city council on Monday. I believe that's 7 PM. It will be hosted as a hybrid meeting in the city council chambers. You know, to the extent you can be in person, that would be great. And I believe that's it. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Night.